Yo guys, welcome to the last lap. Don't forget to drop a lovely, juicy 5-star rating if you're watching on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Hope you enjoy, and let's get into it. Do we think going into Australia, knowing the track and its characteristics, do you see any particular teams? Because Ferrari struggled seemingly more in Saudi than in Bahrain, I'd say, but then they won in Australia last year, so maybe their car's going to... McLaren did well in Australia last year as well. Yeah. Do you see that being a bit different?
I think McLaren are in a holding pattern until Baku, and they get the updates. I think anything that McLaren get is a bonus before Baku, and then effectively that's their first race. Ferrari are really struggling with the front end of the car. You know, their race pace on the hard tyre was horrible. So they're not fully in an understanding of why that tyre degradation is as serious as it is, and until they can get the grip from the front end of the car, they're just going to be taking that pain lap after lap after lap after lap. So I don't think they're going to be in the same brilliant form. Leclerc, that was his most dominant win, wasn't it, last year? So they're not going to be in the mix. It's a question of, you know, Alonso's got a good record, winner before around Albert Park.
He almost put it on the second row, maybe in front row, didn't he, last year?
Yeah, so he did.
Yeah,
He fastest of anyone through the middle.
And the hydraulics went.
And the hydraulics.
And he broke his hand.
Yeah. We're going back through it. It's like, remember the season together.
Yeah. Wow.
But yeah, it was ridiculous. And he's kept it quite well. Someone's racing with an injury at all times and keeping it hushed up, because you never want to get out the car because you never know who's coming in, and that might be the end. There are very few safe seats in Formula One, even if you're Fernando Alonso. So he could be in quali. He's just it was great to be able to see him fight at the front again. I mean, him taking the lead. He won his first race. He won his first race when I was 14 years old.
Was it 2000?
2003, and I'm commentating on Fernando Alonso in the lead again. Like, just for a second, I just completely what? How is he still at it? He's still taking the lead in Grand Prix. It was fantastic, but I think it'll be a private battle between Max and Checo again, and I think that's going to be the reality for a while. Monaco could throw in a curveball, but I think that's the reality for a while.
Question is, can Checo keep up the?
That's what I was about to say.
We saw this a few seasons with Bottas and Hamilton, where Bottas would start the season strong, look close, and then I think Valtteri's talked about this in terms of just
Checo last season, right, as well.
Exactly,
100 points off,
and it's like it's one thing again to like from Valtteri saying like it's one thing to start the season, but to keep up that, that mental strength that you need to sustain it throughout an entire season when you've got such a competitor like Lewis, Valtteri, or like Max for Checo, who's not going to give you any concessions. I think that's fair to say. Like
even for 6th or 5th or wherever it was.
Do you think like this? We're talking about the radios, like even for that, like talking about the radios and like there's definitely a degree of insecurity there. I think from Checo's point of view that Max is gonna try and collect, and they're not just going to settle. Do you think is this just normal? Yeah. Like, are we just making a bigger deal with something that is actually pretty normal and not that deep?
It's a 2-horse race for the foreseeable future. Be fear, paranoia, loathing, history will be in there. Hugh Bird has got a big role to play. He's Checo's race engineer. Yeah. He's going to have to keep his driver confident that there isn't something going on. Yeah. But Checo knows that Max is going to go for everything. Yeah. I mean, that's just the nature of it. So can he win on the circuits where he's traditionally good at? If he can pinch a Baku...
Street circuits.
If he can, always been phenomenal there. Always been if he can start doing that, then he's going to change people's opinions, because I think the majority of the paddock at the moment believe that it's a foregone conclusion for Max. But he's been on the podium before. He's won in Baku, been on the podium before when he was in a team that shouldn't have been anywhere near it. Monaco, obviously last year, delivered under huge pressure. So if he can start doing that, then he can start changing the narrative. And then you got to remember, those garages are like normal office environments. If your team believe that you're in the hunt, if they believe that you're more of a challenger than they maybe thought at the start of the year, then momentum can be a funny thing. It can be a really, really weird thing. There are plenty of seasons in this sport's history where drivers get an opportunity and take their opportunity.
Yeah.
And if you're Nico Rosberg, retire immediately because he knew he was never going to take that opportunity ever again. So, and I think if you'd done a paddock poll halfway through 2016, few people would have backed him to beat Lewis over a full campaign. So the great thing about it is that, we said in qualifying last week in Jeddah, there are no foregone conclusions until you've crossed the checkered flag, and then sometimes, due to some strange penalties, even then, it's not in the bag. So,
Well, I guess that's the one potential upside of Red Bull being seemingly so dominant at the moment, is that Red Bull then, look, hopefully Checo can stay close to Max because we all want a championship fight. I'm sure even the biggest Max Verstappen fans doesn't want to see Max just walk it with because then that takes away a lot of the so much about sporting victories. It's not just winning; it's how you win.
It's the journey along the way.
Of course, it is absolutely. The one possible benefit is that they're so clear that the Red Bull team allow them to fight, kind of like Mercedes had to in 14, 15, 16.
Yeah.
Their car was so clear they didn't need to worry so much about, obviously they tried to calm it down, but they still won the constructors, they still won the drivers in all three of those
Yeah, it
seasons.
feels like there's no threat really to a Constructors' Championship at all this season, so you can actually allow them to...
But also, them fighting and taking points off of each other then potentially allows, when we get into the second half of the season, if Aston Martin, if Ferrari, if they can pull their fingers out, then...
I just don't think we've seen any evidence that Sergio Perez is going to allow that sort of arrangement. Even at Bahrain, when he was like, hang on a second, lads, why am I being told... No, sorry, Bahrain, Saudi.
Yeah.
Hang on a second, why am I being told to do a certain lap? And
That's what I mean. He's like, nah. What? No. What's that? What do you mean? What do you mean, though? Because
I don't think he would even question that if he was like,
But fair
it's
enough.
fine, I don't mind being a number two driver.
I
Like, he's going to fight.
Checo's just got to assume that Max is just going to drive selfishly for the victory every single time. You just got to assume that.
that's what Checo's doing.
Yeah,
It's exactly
of course,
the same thing.
Yeah.
He's like, that's great. You sort yourself up for P3 behind, and then the problem comes if they go wheel to wheel and it doesn't go to plan.
That's what I mean. It's totally different to 2021.
Yeah.
Where Checo knew what he was signed for.
Yes.
And he did that job immaculately.
Yeah.
And now that season's long gone. Now it's a different kettle of fish.
Yeah.
And fire with fire, right?
Yeah.
I hope he's.
I really hope
Do you think he? Do we think he actually can? Do we think he can actually sustain a challenge to Max? Because Max isn't just good. Max is good.
Yeah, Max is an all-time great, waiting for his Wikipedia page to reflect it with the number of titles. It's just a matter of time before
Waiting
he gets
to fill it up.
Just waiting to fill up the roster of victories. That's the joy of the sport. That's the joy of the sport. If he takes Verstappen in a championship fight deep into the year, he would have changed so many people's opinion on his ability as a driver. And history would say it's going to be very, very hard. If you're 3/10 of a second off that driver on average behind him in qualifying, like it was last year, it's going to be hard. But that Red Bull's got such an advantage. That's usually going to mean you're on the front row. So suddenly it's a different story. We've seen incredible performances where drivers who no one gave a chance to. Damon Hill in 1994 is the great example of this. No one thought Damon Hill was capable of leading that Williams team at all. And if he'd made it through one corner and overtaken on the straight, he would have been world champion. So you just never know whether a driver's got it within them and they've never had the opportunity. So to conclude, game on. It's on.
Look, yes, lads, we've got a championship.
Over recent history, it's felt like Max has got somewhat untouchable since we've seen him against Ricciardo, and he hasn't had to fight a teammate properly because he done such a convincing job on Gasly, Albon, and Perez at the start.
But he's also had the problem with that in that there were not two drivers pushing that team forward in the same way, which is not to attack the proven talent of Albon and Gasly because they're very, very fast. They just couldn't.
They were young.
They couldn't unlock the car.
Yeah.
And the team made a conscious decision to stop developing the car to a precipice where it could only be driven a certain way.
Yeah.
And since they've done that,
Yeah.
they're Constructors champions again.
Yeah.
So they've made a conscious decision to do that and to just dial it back a bit, broader operating window. Now look what's happened. They've got the broadest operating window of everyone, and they're going to win the Constructors by guarantee. So then you've got a two-horse race. So, if it's not one problem, it's another. But Max lost out on the setup, having a second car there. And so, but he he is going to have to get used to it, much in the same way that Lando Norris is going to have to get used to Oscar Piastri being a slightly more adaptable driver. So, but that will just bring the best out of them. They're elite drivers. It will just bring a better performance out. It always does.
Unless, of course, want to see.
Max and Checo spend the season crashing into each other, in which case we've got an absolute classic.
And through comes along.
So. Hopefully. Well, maybe in Australia this weekend. We'll see. We got any, what should we say, predictions?
Early prediction.
Yeah, predictions for the race. I mean, it's hard to look past Max and Checo 1-2, isn't it? Do we have any, rather than that, I'd say, do we have any particular predictions, like an out there one, like, or Alfa Romeo going to be really strong, for example? Like your knowledge of the track and of the drivers and who's suited to who, because it's kind of a hybrid street track.
Yeah,
because it's got the close walls.
It is a strange. Yeah, it's a closed-off park, but they are public roads. But it is a semi-permanent facility.
Yeah,
so you do have a runoff, but the walls aren't that far away. Is there going to be a bolter again? I think Williams. I focus on Williams. They're coming out of a weekend for the first time where they feel they underperformed, which is not a thing that Williams have had for a while. They felt that they had the pace for points and they didn't get them. That then puts the onus on the drivers to deliver. And I actually think, Albon got an audacious strategy to get a point last year, but I think I think Albon especially will be in the mix for points this year. And again, it's a case of, do you go for the normal strategy and try and bag 8th, or do you try something audacious and you really try to get in the mix if the Ferraris are struggling with tyres again?
Yeah. Do we see anyone try that again, by the way? Because that was one of the most unique strategies I think I've ever seen.
Did anyone, in terms of in the paddock, was everyone shocked by that?
Yeah. That was not a viable strategy. That was a complete roll of the dice.
It must have been almost kind of not hard to keep up with, but hard to understand that it was happening. Sort of. You're commentating over and being like, hang on a second.
You do sometimes have races where you're looking at the monitor and you're like, no, he hasn't pitted. And he's got to pit. Okay, so he hasn't pitted, and you're like, and then you forget.
Is that a technical glitch?
You've gone beyond lap 45, so you're like texting, has he pitted? And you're trying to go back through, and you're like, okay, he hasn't pitted. And for them to make it work, that's all a team. They got more pace than this time last year, so they don't need to go to such extremes.
But also, if Logan doesn't get his lap time deleted at Saudi in qualifying, which was, it didn't add any pace to it. He actually out-qualified Alex.
It wasn't enough to get into Q2.
He would have got into Q2.
Another teammate sitting up straight and going, hold on.
Yeah.
Different story.
That's what I mean, which is what we want. We want all of these teammate battles to be close at the end of the day. It's always going to be more entertaining.
Is there one on the grid?
I'm trying to think.
I really think
even Joe's close up to
Stroll
Bottas.
has improved. I think this season, I think both the performances from Stroll, whilst injured, have been very solid.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I mean, he shouldn't really be anywhere near a car.
He couldn't get out at Bahrain.
If he was being sensible, I think he'd be maybe starting his season this weekend. But he's, again, we're talking about changing opinions in the paddock.
Yeah.
He's completely changed the perception by getting in there and grafting his way to some points that, should Mercedes and Ferrari suddenly develop very, very quickly, they could be vital points come the end of the year. It could make a huge difference to the team.
Well, at Saudi, Lance was within a 10th in Q1, a 10th in Q2, and a 2 and a bit tenths in Q3 from Fernando.
That's just because he bottled the end of the lap, though, didn't he? I think
he had a stinky last sector as well, didn't he? Yeah. So it's kind of, you're right. I don't think there really is any massive discrepancies between teammates throughout the field, which is happy
good
days.
News.
Now we just need the cars to be the same.
Yeah.
Okay? No, not actually the same.
Actually, the same spec series.
Closer.
Tommo likes F1 spec series, everyone.
Oh, no, practice as gods.
No
series.
Illuminati
Have some respect for
confirmed.
their heritage, Tommo.
Get Ferrari out of the sport next. I've heard it all.
Delete them. Just team 1, team 2. Who needs team names anymore?
ABC.
What do we need?